So we're into economic development in 3.1, which is the development section. This section is really big, so we've split it up into three parts, and I would suggest just stopping at each part as always and making sure you understand everything before moving on. There's a lot of overlap from theme one, which is population and settlement. So a lot of this is really useful for all the other sections of the course. I do recommend starting off with this if you're going to study theme three. So we're looking at a couple of ways that we can measure this. First of all, GDP is a common one. We've mentioned it in previous videos, and it's looking at the total goods and services produced in a country in a year. However, we still need to get a more accurate reading. This isn't going to tell us how wealthy everybody is in the country, right? So when we look at GDP, we can break it down into GDP per capita. So that way we can see the average divided down by the population, gives us a better indication. You would come across maybe maps like this where you've got to be able to categorize, look through, and describe the differences here. So I can generally talk about like regions, and say if this is all you got in your exam, you would want to have an idea of the different regions you could describe, right? So North America, Western Europe, Central Asia, Africa, South Central North. You can also talk about Southeast Asia over here, or Eastern Asia, and Australia, New Zealand down here, or Oceania, you could describe it as. You can also talk about this area as Central America, Caribbean region. You can have West, Central, North Europe. So these are all regions that you can discuss in generalities, right? If you don't know the countries' names. Okay, so let's have a look here at the GDP per capita, and we can see a couple of the trends here forming. We've got our typical developed countries like Australia, New Zealand down here, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan's there, Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, and then we've got most of Europe in that green zone until we get down to the Balkan area. And yeah, then North America, with Mexico coming in as the lowest in the GDP per capita, but the USA and Canada quite a lot higher. So that's the general trend there for maybe higher GDPs. Lower GDPs then overall, according to this, the lowest are coming in mostly in Africa, with places like Yemen, Afghanistan, North Korea, and Haiti just being slightly more underdeveloped there than its neighbors in their region. Another way we can measure that is the GNI. So we could look at the GNI, which is the same. We're looking at pretty much everything that's been the income overall of the country. But yeah, we're looking at also adding on this idea of remittance, which we've mentioned again and again with like migration, impacts of moving people around the world. And yeah, that can actually add up to quite a lot. GNI PPP, you might see as well, that's per purchasing power parity per person. This allows you to compare currencies to the US dollar. So let's have a look here. What we can see is that if we're looking at the GDP per capita and we're looking at the GNIs per capita, if we look at the highest here on the left, we can see that we've got similar countries in the highest in both categories. Ireland's here, Ireland's here, Luxembourg's here, Luxembourg's here, Liechtenstein, Liechtenstein, right? So a lot of the same countries, Norway, Norway, are coming up in both places. So this shows us that there's not a huge difference between GNI per capita and GDP per capita. It's the same on the other side with the lowest countries in the world, almost identical. Burundi, Somalia, Mozambique, Central African Republic. So it keeps going on. Very, very similar list across there. But it's when we get into some of the countries between the lowest and the highest and all the countries that are there, we start to see some significant differences. For example, China and Costa Rica, with GDP per capita, we see that they're around 12,500. So they're pretty even there. But if we look at the GNI per capita, we can see that they actually are quite different. So in GDP per capita on the world average, they pretty much appear next to each other, but they're actually quite a distance apart when it comes to GNI per capita. On the other side, though, we have social indicators. So life expectancy is something we've mentioned throughout, especially when we talked about population structure, population pyramids. So the life expectancy telling us the average number of years that you're going to live if you're born at that year. And yeah, if everything remains consistent in the future. So let's have a look. Hong Kong and Japan then would be countries that we would assume are very high in terms of development. So their average life expectancy is 85. So that's incredibly high for the world average. Then we look at the Central African Republic. Hey, as always, if that was useful, like, subscribe, and I'll be able to post more videos then. But also, if you want the rest of the content, follow the links below and you should find what you're looking for. All right, good luck, guys.